So Dustin, this is a really ambitious project that you chose to take on. I guess where did the idea for it come from? You've
Right.
dealt in similar territory before with Milk, but talk about focusing on Cleve Jones and all the other proponents of this movement.
Well, I mean, there has never been recorded, popularized LGBT history like this. Never. I mean, that's pretty astounding that we've been in a movement for half a century now that's been very open and public, and yet young people don't have any sense that they can, well, they can't just tune in and have a sense that they have a history, that they have forefathers and foremothers that have been fighting for them, which increases their sense of isolation. It's very dangerous. And so for me, personally, it started as a mission to create a history that's easily accessible. It's part of the reason I thought, if you're going to do it on a network. I would not have done it if it was with some of my old pals who I know would have been able to spend more time and more money, but we likely would have been preaching to the choir. And so it was only when ABC said they were interested in doing an LGBTQ history that I dropped everything 4 years ago and started working on this. I had a concern at the time too. I was a part of a Supreme Court case around marriage equality, and I remember as I was walking up those steps, as we started to succeed for the first time really, I thought we might have gotten so drunk on our successes now we've lost our connection with other social justice movements. That's dangerous. Minorities depend on their connection with other minorities. Harvey Milk built a coalition of workers and racial minorities and seniors, and that's how he won elections, not just with gay people. And where were the connections? You heard gay, straight, black, white, same struggle, same fight, but I wasn't seeing it. And I thought if we continue like this, we're going to be defeated. And we were. And I'd hoped it was a cautionary tale. Now I think it's a roadmap of how we move forward. Understanding we have to rebuild those connections with other social justice movements to move forward again. It's why these characters don't come from the LGBTQ movement. When you meet these characters, when you meet the real Roma, the real Cleve, the real Ken, they come from the women's movement, the peace movement, the black civil rights movement. By the end of the series, they're giving back to work on immigration and healthcare reform. And it's who they really are. And I think that's why the we is the biggest and most important word in the title and in the series. This is a we thing. And I think what we've learned, thankfully, from things like the internet, is that every single one of us is a minority in one way or another. It just depends on how you slice that pie. Every single person on this planet has an interest in when we rise, in us rising up together, in that we, and when we rise. And so, that was the job. That was the needle to be thread. Find these real people who lived these lives of coalition building, who did it their entire lives, which really narrowed it down. And also important to me that they survived. Because too often we tell stories of our social justice leaders, and the message in the end is that if you fight for equality, you die in the end. I've made that movie. I didn't want to make that movie again. And so I had to hunt for people who actually worked their entire life for social justice and survived and thrived. And that's how I ended up with this handful of people who, thank God, actually knew each other and worked together. So I could build a story around it and not make things up. 4 years of my life to bring this little puppy to reality. And it's been really wonderful to see how it's been received, particularly by the core LGBTQ audience who's just starving for more. The only criticism I hear is more. More people, more depictions, more history, more. And I think we're starting to feel the power of having a history.
I was going to ask, as a writer, obviously you have certain dramatic responsibilities in storytelling. So how did you condense or narrow your focus? Because you cover a lot of ground here. There's about 40 years of history.
40 years of history in 6 hours when you take out the commercials.
Right.
It's a lot, and it's a lot of responsibility. And anyone who tells you that what you're seeing is exactly how it happened is lying. In any movie, it always drives me nuts when I go to Q&As and they're like, "No, that's right. That's exactly how that happened." I'm like, that can't be true. You're lying. In my case, though, I try not to bend reality very much at all, and I wanted this to be authentic and unassailable, because the attacks I was hearing from the very beginning, and even with things like Milk, was this never happened, this isn't true, that was never said, and it's insidious that the opposition to equality is smart enough to try and take away our history. So the way I bend history is by omission. The way I get it to fit in 4 hours is telescoping timeline and combining characters. But I keep the real people involved the entire way to make sure I've not bent reality so much that it snaps. I want it to be truthful. I want people to be able to look into these histories and not find that it didn't happen that way, but that so much more happened. And it is tough. And it does mean you have to put a lot in to tell enough of the story that it communicates what you need to in an emotional way so that it can connect, but that you understand there is a history. And I think that was the debate early on. I heard, early on, like some people, not a lot, but some people saying, gosh, there's a lot in here. This is dense. Will people be able to absorb all this, comprehend it, and feel it? And the answer resoundingly was yes. And in fact, the only thing I heard on the other side of it was quite the opposite, which was more. We want more. And I think part of that is understanding that for LGBTQ people and people of diversity, when we talk about politics and policy and our history, we're talking about our lives. That's what we talk about. It must be nice to be a person who, when they talk about politics, it feels distant from them. That's not LGBTQ people, and that's not most people of diversity in this country right now. So when you hear that history and you hear the politics and When We Rise, for a lot of people, that's very, very, very personal and moving.
You directed the last segment of this, which deals with Prop 8 and the fight for marriage equality. Why did you choose that specific segment to direct?
The last one?
Yes.
Because I was so busy prepping the other one.
Yeah.
Imagine if I disappeared to prep an episode when we still had all... It's kind of just how it goes. Like, I think, we didn't have a traditional pilot, so I couldn't direct the first. And I reached out to Gus Van Sant, who I love and adore, and we have such a great partnership. So, go, Gus, go. And he did a beautiful job and helped set a tone that was critical for us. And by the end, I had time because I didn't need to be prepping another or writing or rewriting a subsequent episode. So that was the challenge, was to direct that. The benefit I had is that I was there. I lived those years. I was in those courtrooms. I experienced all of that. That's when I met a lot of these people who were depicted for the first time. And so I didn't have to do a lot of research around that. I was in the room, and so that was helpful.
I remember, it's funny, I remember when Milk came out, it was at the same time that the Prop 8 passed, and so there was this kind of weird dynamic of, on the one hand, you've got this movie depicting a gay civil rights hero, and then on the other hand, you have this horrible step backwards.
Yeah.
Having lived through that, what was that experience like for you personally, having written that movie and then?
Well, and in Milk, it centered around a proposition in the state of California.
Right.
And in that movie, we saw how people rallied, created coalitions, and beat that proposition. And then we saw how that didn't happen with Proposition 8. And here we are again. With When We Rise, it was deja vu. When we were writing this show, it was supposed to be a warning for us to, come together, let's protect our gains. A little bit of celebration, saying, look what we've done. We are a people who are fulfilling that promise that history bends towards justice. And in the middle of us creating this show, we found ourselves in a backlash again. And I have felt that before, and I felt it now. And it does make the show tougher in some ways, it's nice to watch a good civil rights film when we know we're moving forward. Let's be honest. It's a lot more difficult to watch it when you know we've messed up. And we messed up, guys. And we weren't looking out for our brothers the same way we were looking out for ourselves. And we left our brothers and our sisters behind in a lot of other movements. And it is tougher to watch in some ways When We Rise now. And I think that's why we're seeing that people are watching it privately. And they're watching it on their own time. I'm not going to lie. I was concerned when I saw the first numbers come in. but I've been so inspired to watch how it builds and builds and builds and builds. I believe over 30 million people have seen it or started to watch it at this point, and that's before we count all our online. That's more than I've ever watched an LGBTQ movie in a movie theater, all of them combined. But I think people need to watch it on their own. And I think it's an emotional experience. I think sometimes it creates soul searching. But I urge people to do it. I urge people to do it with their friends and their family, because sometimes it can be tough. But this is a roadmap. When We Rise is a roadmap of how we confront this backlash and get that pendulum of progress moving forward again. You see that these real people faced actual backlashes that aren't so dissimilar from now, and they won. And we have to win again.
And that's what's really powerful about the timing of this, is that you can't watch these scenes of protest that happened in the past without thinking of scenes of protest that are happening right now. And I mean, obviously you couldn't have predicted what was going to happen as you were writing this and producing it. But I mean, it feels as if it came out at a special time, doesn't it?
I think it comes out at an unfortunately necessary time. I mean, I would never ever have wished for it to be so necessary right now. It's why I urge people to learn from it. And I know that's a bigger ask. I wish I was able to say, hey, come celebrate with us with it, because there is celebration in it. But I know I'm asking people to come and learn from it and be moved by it, and then get up and move themselves because of it. To use it as a tool to guide their next actions in this time, to use it as a tool of motivation, because man, persistence is the toughest part of resisting. And I'm hoping people will use it as a tool for that. But I would never in my life have wished it came out in such a necessary time, because I know lives are at risk. People of diversity, not just LGBTQ people, living in isolation in areas where they're being treated unequally because of how different they are. That isolation is dangerous, particularly with young people and young minorities, because I know that sometimes they consider dire solutions to that unequal treatment. Lives are at stake when you start telling people of diversity they are less than because they're different. We live in dangerous times. Tune into When We Rise and you'll see how to get out of them.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk to you about the cast of the show. Obviously, you're working with real people.
Yeah.
But I wonder how you found the right actors to play these parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of it was occasionally, and I don't do this often, someone would pop into my mind because I see the right person. In this case, knowing Roma Guy, she's so funny, but if you lie to her, it's like she has a lie detector in her head, and she will cut you down. And when you think of actresses who can be that, Mary Louise Parker, she can be very funny, very warm, but she's got a strong truth detector. And I really wanted her to play the role of Roma Guy. And when I got the news that she had said yes, it was very inspiring. It was certainly the first moment I dared to dream that we'd actually get this made. And then we start casting, because I don't tend to think about who is going to play these real people. I'm really focused on just getting the real people right. And Guy Pearce and Rachel Griffith came on board pretty soon after. Certainly they were dreams to have in these roles. And Michael K. Williams called me and told me an incredibly emotional story on the phone. I was in San Francisco doing location scouting, and he talked to me about how personal this was to him, about the friends he lost during a plague in New York City. And I don't think he ever gave me a choice not to cast him. And then the young people, we started early on. Gus loves to audition. He loves to find new talent. We had wonderful casting directors who helped us do that, and went into the theater world in a big way, and brought a lot of people out of New York. New discoveries like Jonathan Majors, who's fantastic. I think he's already done 2 or 3 films at this point. Who plays Ken Jones. Austin McKenzie, who was on Broadway. Emily Skeggs, who was on Broadway. These really wonderful young people who I think folks should really tune in and see the great work they brought to it, and certainly stay tuned because I think they're all going to keep knocking it out of the park.
One more awards-related question.
Oh, right. Yeah, we're in that. It's awards time.
Well, I wanted to ask you about, since you're an Oscar winner for Milk,
Yeah.
I just wanted to know what that kind of recognition meant for you.
I mean, it's important for me. I mean, the kind of work that I do, listen, you don't do it for money. I'm not making the biggest deals in Hollywood, for sure. I do the kind of work I do because if it gets seen, it can help move the needle to a more accepting world. I did a panel 2 days ago and I said, and I mean it, I didn't cross an ocean and a continent to come back here to LA just to have another trophy. I mean, they're lovely. It's exciting, I'm not gonna lie about that. But the important part of this kind of recognition for movies like Milk and shows like When We Rise is that it shines a light on them. It's that it helps more people find them. And in this case, and I'll almost get tearful, we have organizations now working to build syllabus around When We Rise to get it into high schools across the nation. They need help shining a light on this show so that schools and educators know it exists, are excited about getting those syllabus, that curriculum, and getting it into their classroom. For the first time, having a tool to teach LGBTQ history. And our goal is to have it there in October. And I'm not gonna lie, I want nominations. I want to get the spotlight of the Emmys onto this show so that we can get this story and these stories into schools and we can help educate young people of diversity that there have been people fighting for them in their lives for a very long time, and hopefully that gives them hope. It's life-saving. So, for me, it's about that. These award shows have the power to shine light, and in many ways that can be incredibly helpful.
Dustin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.